You know what's better than a new star system? New game systems. At least, if you enjoy your overall game experience improving rather than just more areas to have that experience, then this video is going to be pretty exciting for you. We're about to look at the biggest features I think we could see in 2023. There are plenty of other possibilities, but these are the features that I think would make a substantial difference to gameplay for most players, if done right. Forget Pyro for the next 20 minutes. These are the features that might make a real difference in Star Citizen this year. And if you want to win a Drake Corsair with a copy of Star Citizen, stick around until the end of the video. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Time. As always with Star Citizen, there's a chance anything here might be delayed, but these first several at least seem to have progressed pretty far along at this point from what we can see. Now, I'll admit, this first one is a bit of a free pass. It's pretty ambiguous, but I'll explain. I think a game's new player experience should focus mainly around a few key things: interaction, information, and onboarding. These three things are constantly being updated by smaller additions, like the hangar number indicator that tells you where your ship is, the indicator that points towards the ship entrance itself, the certification missions that you start to climb up the reputation ladder of a profession, and even the journal that introduces you to your current location, jurisdiction, and topics of interest. All of these features present the player with information they can act on, an introduction to something they'll be doing pretty often in the game, and a better understanding of how the game universe itself works. In addition to these features, Star Citizen has a bit of this sprinkled around, but there are some huge holes. Walkway signs, for instance, will take you where you need to go, but the game never really introduces you to the idea of needing to use them, something that isn't really done that much in games, so might be good to teach. You can also easily interact with objects using just the F key, but that's also not clearly communicated at first glance. Everywhere you look, you can see signs that there was never a concerted effort to make this first 30 minutes of the game simpler. This year, I believe two other features also on this list will help to solve those problems: scanning and a new interaction system. But since we'll be getting to those soon, I'd also like to point out the intense realization by CIG over the last year that they really need to make this experience better.
A bit large complaints on the PU, just getting in, new person getting into the game, like how do I get out of bed? How do I do some basic stuff? How do I understand? Right now it's sort of trial by fire, but we need to make that better. And so that is actually one of the big things we've been focusing on, and the player interactions.
It's on the monthly reports, it's in the video reports, and the progress tracker even specifically points out the first 30 minutes being a focus. I fully expect to see a meaningful change in the new player experience this year, maybe not everywhere, but definitely at ArcCorp and possibly at Lorville. I expect it to include things like small tutorials around the shop experience, interactions with objects, and getting started in the verse with missions and travel. Things that should be taught to the player, but haven't been because they've just changed so much in the past. But with things like commodity kiosks, a better interaction system, map systems, and scanning coming into play now, I think they're feeling confident they can get something substantial for all the new players coming in. And while it will update the new player experience, the complete system won't be implemented until closer to beta in order to make sure it's fully featured. Persistent hangars will mark another step forward in player ownership in the game. While you can spawn your ship to any hangar in any city, that hangar has no history, much like each shard before 3.18. And just like with PES, persistent hangars will allow you to leave whatever you need inside of your hangar to retrieve later. The first step would likely be to make this work for cargo and commodities, but I could see this expanding from there. Even before HABs, these hangars will act as our homes in the verse where we can relax with friends and keep our belongings. We'll use freight elevators to load cargo onto our ships, as both features will come with the second step of the cargo refactor. We will also be dedicating time and money to physically loading cargo ships in these hangars as well. We still don't know if these hangars will be instanced or if we'll have to pay fees for storage just yet, but there's a really good chance we'll be seeing it some point this year. Along with FPS scanning, the interaction system is one of the key features that could really improve the experience for new players. It's gone from the horrible use key way back in the day to the way too fluid inner thought system to the better but kinda unintuitive system we have now to what we've seen recently to be a prototype for the next iteration. During the presentation at CitizenCon, CIG acknowledged how important this is to the huge increase in new players entering the game over the last year, and old players like myself that, well, still forget the controls. And while I hope this will be customizable in the final form, I'm sure this is definitely not that final form. So expect to see a more polished version sometime this year before it's introduced. This kind of addition would go perfectly with lockers, which are the next step in physical inventories and would allow us to have loadouts and easy to access saved sets of equipment. But maybe then I'm just getting too wishful. One ship we know almost for certain is coming this year is the Argo SRV. And while there's always a possibility it launches without its tractor beam, the only reason for it to exist, it ain't likely. I could be wrong, but I fully expect the SRV to launch with some tractor beam functionality. And while I hope the other ships that have tractor beams would also gain the functionality, you just never know. But we can see that both the SRV and vehicle tractor beams are finishing up known work on the progress tracker this year. We've seen the tractor beam and the SRV both teased, and ships generally don't launch without some kind of use anymore. While we've only seen the ship in the late gray box stage up until this point, we can tell there's literally nothing else to this ship besides a bed and a tractor beam. So there's a good chance that both will work by the time the ship launches. With the persistent hangars and cargo refactor likely bringing in larger boxes to Star Citizen later this year, this is looking like almost a necessity and a certainty for Star Citizen to make that work, along with yet another introduction of a new career path in the game, the Space Tug. You'll be able to pull around ships, mineable rocks, salvageable derelicts, and more. You'll also be able to assist large ships in escaping atmosphere and drag objects through quantum travel. It'll open up a lot of possibilities for sandbox gameplay, and it's going to make cargo hauling and manipulation much easier. Multicrew gameplay isn't really a feature on its own. Kind of like the new player experience, it's a group of features. In this case, fire hazards, their respective fire extinguishers, life support, and resource management. Each of these features has either finished or will finish current scheduled work within a few months of this video. We've seen these features shown off in quite a bit of detail in development environments. All of these features have come up in monthly reports, and we know Multicrew gameplay is a focus and one of the major goals for release this year, as can be seen in the recent letter from the chairman. But what does it include? Well, for starters, think of your spaceship as a boat in Sea of Thieves. But instead of ditching out water and patching holes, you're replacing power relays, putting out fires, and repairing components. This is engineering. Yet another career path possibly introduced this year and one of the biggest professions in the game. It's actually a major part of one of the most crucial systems in all of Star Citizen. For more information on how it works, see my recent video on the career path and how this will affect every multi-crew ship in the game. Otherwise, be ready for this set of features to slowly make spaceships and space travel much more intensive for those larger ships. This will likely begin with the Hammerhead and Hull A and branch out from there, but we don't know exactly how long it will take for the features to be adopted across all ships. It may be relatively quick, but it could also be disappointingly long. But be sure to keep a lookout for updates on this in the next 2 to 3 months on Inside Star Citizen. FPS radar and scanning is one of the best things that can help newcomers understand the game around them. I think this change is going to feel as natural as the money transfer app or the inventory additions, and it's going to make it much easier to play the game for long-term veterans as well. But don't expect a full mini-map on your HUD with this particular change. This is more about detection than it is about map markers, and we'll talk about those later. The radar system will function as a far-field decibel meter. We haven't seen it in action, but we've seen this referenced even back in 2019. Not only have we known about the concept of this for quite a while, FPS radar and scanning has actually shown up on the roadmap a couple of times in the past. Some of you may remember that this happened with salvage. However, just like I've said over the last year, seeing a feature like salvage show up on the monthly reports, in Inside Star Citizen, and actually in visual form generally points to the feature actually coming to the game as we now see in 3.18. So looking at FPS radar and scanning and being skeptical of it coming this year is reasonable. But I would point out that we do have a lot better idea of what's happening with this feature in the last 6 months. Anyways, the scanning feature will center around a ping feature, much like with your ships. You'll be able to detect items, ships, and other objects to gain more information about your surroundings. Not a new idea by any means, as we've seen it in other games, especially in the genre, but a huge step forward for a game like Star Citizen where you literally can't even tell what ship you have. I am truly unsure of when this feature might be ready for the persistent universe. Scheduled work on the feature finished up last year, however plenty of work needs to go into preparing it for the PU, as the initial version is made for Squadron 42, which always comes first. So as Chris mentioned in the letter for the chairman this year, expect later in the year if it does end up happening. Bounty hunting has been a profession in-game for a long time. It was one of the earliest things you could do in-game to make money, but it was always meant to be much more intensive than flying to a marker and shooting a ship. There's meant to be a sequence of pinging comm arrays, checking air traffic control, and talking to informants, among other things, to figure out where your target is, and then apprehend them without killing them. All of this is planned for Bounty Hunting V2, which seems to be the first profession scheduled to take the next step in the trudge through the feature tiers. This system will include the use of a new MobiGlas app, the security network feature that defines no-go zones, and virtual AI, one of the lofty goals proposed for the quantum economy simulation. In addition to overhauling the PvP bounty hunting loops, this could also create procedural AI targets for players to go after with different names, stories, crimes, and locations. At this point in development, I don't expect this to be too expansive, but it should give us a look at the quantum simulation, and hopefully some better player-to-player interactions like a fireman's carry, as it has been confirmed in a monthly report that this will require things like rope and tying and, well, you get the rest. Again, don't expect the whole game to change with this, but it could end up being a very positive sign for the future of all professions, or it could end up being a bunch of tailor-made missions. We'll just have to see. I'm also curious how the MobiGlas app will work out with this, but we'll talk about that later. Actually, let's stick to the MobiGlas for a bit. You know what the worst feature in the game is right now? Well, I guess I kind of spoiled it with the chapter title, but it's the Starmap. It was just built for a different game. A game that was just a static orange backdrop called Crusader, a lonely space station called Port Olisar, and a few other local destinations. Yeah, the game used to be small. Now it just does not get the job done. There's no search, no placeable map markers, the graphics are outdated, there are tons of big usability issues, etc. We need a new Starmap, and CIG knows. We've seen the concept images from way back, and we've seen some of the newer mapping tech they've shown off for local and interior maps. This stuff looks really good, by the way. I hope we see more of it soon. And we know it's been worked on via the monthly reports for at least the last 18 months, with work dating back on the progress tracker even further. And between the clear focus on VFX regarding Starmap development on the monthly reports recently, and the ending of currently scheduled work, it's possible this is actually finally close. And we aren't just talking a star map here. From CIG's own descriptions, this is a map that goes from the stars down to the bunker you're about to raid. Those local maps I showed you earlier are part of the same mapping system, just at a different scale. Every cartographic need you may have will be handled by this new app, including that minimap. But even now, after all this time, we still lack the details that matter. Will there be search, filtering, automatic waypoints, variable routes, placeable markers? There are still so many questions left unanswered that have been mentioned in passing but not specifically confirmed. It does seem to be on their list of goals for the year, and considering some of the things they're working on as I mentioned, it sounds like it might just be ready. One of our biggest problems might be solved this year, but don't get your hopes too high just yet. It's not going to happen until it's happened. The AI in Star Citizen struggles with network issues, but it's also lacked some major smarts in combat as well. As we've been reading about for some time in the monthly reports over the last year, work on AI has gone well. We've seen this reflected at CitizenCon last year too. With the mention on the letter from the chairman as well, there's a good chance we'll see a noticeable improvement in FPS AI this year. Though there's always a chance that it could be held back until server meshing can alleviate the strain that makes them run poorly in the first place. Crap, man, you mentioned server meshing, you told them not to think about that. Okay, but if these improvements do happen, they could include things like perception and stealth-related mechanics, such as searching and communicating with one another to find you, picking up weapons and usables from fellow friends and foes on the ground to use against you, different types of enemies that diversify your combat situations, identifying aircraft and shooting them down, and more. And these are just combat AI improvements. These changes could definitely make missions more interesting for players, especially with AI seeming to already perform a little bit better in the 3.18 PTU. Let's talk more about that MobiGlas, which is your personal menu in the game. Over the years, we've seen a few MobiGlas apps slowly added to the in-game menu. After the building blocks in-house UI building system was completed, this happened more commonly. We've also seen the actual menu itself change in appearance back in the 3.0 days. But there still hasn't been an overall building blocks changeover to the whole system using this new tool they've been making newer and more polished interfaces with. We've seen the work scheduled to be finished last year, and we've seen a very nice looking working version for Squadron 42. But it's going to take some time for the team to move that over to the persistent universe where we can use it, which I can't wait for because that comm screen is just so laggy. That being said, with this rework, there are a few new apps we might be able to expect. There will be the tracking app, showing us a history of our criminality, adding more context to our overall reputation. The Hangar Manager app that emulates an ASOP terminal, allowing players to spawn ships, access landing services, and maybe even call your ship to come pick you up. The Security app used in Bounty Hunter V2, and the Mission Manager app, which would probably call for more context and information added to the missions we're running. The Bounty Hunter app likely won't be done for both the old MobiGlas and the new one coming unless they want to double the work, so I think this could predate the Bounty Hunting V2 change, but who knows? These kinds of things can get confusing. Either way, the MobiGlas and all currently listed apps will have finished all currently scheduled work this year, at least as of January. And while I expect and hope this to be a side-by-side change with the new Starmap, it was not specifically mentioned as a goal in the chairman's letter, so it's all up in the air with this one. Keep an eye out, but don't keep your hopes up. Finally, the feature I am least sure of here. The quantum travel experience is much like the MobiGlas, old. It got an update with the third phase of development about the same time as the MobiGlas. In Alpha 3.0, planetary jumps, extended jump ranges, and changed graphics gave us a nice refresh for the time being. But we knew there would need to be a finalized model at some point. As the game expands into new systems and changes in other ways, the travel mode needs to account for much larger distances, a different philosophy about how long we will be in quantum travel, and other types of travel, like quantum boost. It needs an overhaul, and we've seen that work creeping into monthly reports over the last 5 to 7 months. The scheduled work seems to be coming to a close pretty soon, and if all goes perfectly well, it may go to testing in Squadron 42 for a few quarters. That being said, we know nothing about this feature. We don't know if it will look like the current version but better, or like the newer cinematic videos. We're not sure if it will be the same speeds, or how group quantum travel will end up working. It wasn't mentioned at CitizenCon or in the recent chairman's letter. The only signs we have of this are the monthly report and the progress tracker. So not high in confidence, but maybe we'll hear some update. It does seem like a feature that's still far off, but there are a few signs and related features that we've mentioned earlier that seem possible for the end of the year. But more than likely, this will be something we see in the more distant future. This is 10 to 12 features that have a high chance of coming to Star Citizen that each would I think have changed the game pretty majorly in 2021. It's nice to see so many substantial features on the prospective list this year compared to years prior. And even if 5 of these make it this year, the experience will be much different. I think there's a certain amount of features on this list that we should expect considering how much more development needs to accelerate, but I would not put up a date, quarter, or even a guarantee on the year for any of them. All in all, this video is a hypothetical look at the biggest features I have some confidence we might see this year, not a guarantee. I always approach these predictions with cautious optimism, but this year is an exciting one, I'll admit. And I'm feeling a lot better about actually changing gameplay than I do about a new star system right now, although I do recognize the importance of server meshing. But these gameplay features are where I'm going to be putting most of my attention for the year, and I encourage anybody who wants to have a better time to join me, because obsessing over Pyro might make this year even slower. These are just the major features that may come, but there are plenty of other currently known and unknown features that might make their way into the game this year as well. And I'll always be trying to cover the progression of those features for you here every week on my videos, podcasts, and live streams. So if you enjoyed this overview of the possible year ahead, consider subscribing to catch the latest. And if you want deeper dives and more context to the development of Star Citizen, become a channel member down below and check out the exclusive videos that I make every month for those who support. And if you want to win a Corsair mid-size multi-crew exploration ship, make sure you found the secret code in this week's video getting you more entries, and use the link down below in the video description to enter. All of you supporters I mentioned will get all those codes either way, so don't worry about it. I hope you learned something new in this video, and I'll catch you all in the next.